Welcome to the Ethics Experts, where we're elevating ethics and compliance and HR to the strategic level it's supposed to be.
Hey, welcome to the Ethics Experts. If it is your first time joining, welcome. And if you're a returning subscriber, hey bestie, hope you're having a great day. You look amazing today. You see what happens when you subscribe to the Ethics Experts? You get a bonus greeting on every single episode. So gently caress that subscribe button and join us as we change the world. I am here with my good friend, Naphtali Visser. He is a coach. He is an author. He wrote a really cool book. He's an EthicsVerse alum. And we're going to dive in and have a pretty cool conversation today about culture, about how to affect change, how to view the world, and how to really magnify your impact. So how's it going, buddy?
It's going great. Thanks for having me back.
Absolutely. So let's kind of go, I always kind of like to start with your story. I think you have a really interesting story, and there's some elements in that story that I've told probably a dozen times since I first met. So why don't you kind of walk us through sort of how you arrived at this place that you're at, where you're a coach and you're an author and you're helping organizations you're helping people improve their organizations and improve their world.
Yeah, sure. Well, I don't know how far back you want to go, but I've always been a somewhat empathetic kind of person, and just sort of kindness kind of ruled my world. That got me beat up a lot and early on, but another story for another day. But when I started my working career, I was I graduated with a computer science degree, so I was doing programming in the really early days of the internet, and I don't know, the first few work experiences I had were just kind of really crappy. I was working on some giant projects, so in that way it was kind of fun, working on Fortune 50 brands and stuff like that, blah blah blah. But I don't know, the work environment wasn't great. People were, not only were they not kind to each other, there was a lot of just backstabbing and just kind of cruelty and and it just wasn't, you'd work sometimes till 3 a.m, literally, and you'd come in at 9:30 and it'd be why are you late? It was just, insanity.
Yeah.
So, at the ripe old age of about 23, I was I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
And I decided to start a company. And the idea behind the company, unlike why a lot of people start a company, is because they've got a great product idea or service idea or whatever. My idea was I just want to go to work every day and be happy. And so that was it. I was I'm going to start a company. And of course, we'll write software of some sort, because it was a great time to do that in the early days of the internet. And that's what me and my buddies know how to do. But we're not trying to change the world or make $1 million or something. So we did that. And, fast forward a little bit, we had a great company. We grew it to 15 people. It was obviously still quite a small company, but we had a great time. We got some really nice projects, actually some pretty decent sized clients, especially for a company our size, and had a great time. And I never explicitly shared this sort of philosophy with people, or any philosophy that I could possibly have had at 23. I just embodied kind of the type of environment that I wanted to have, and I attracted those sorts of folks. And anyway, so we really built this sort of kindness, family-oriented environment that I wanted. Fast forward about 4 years, we had 2 really catastrophic financial events hit us in a really short 2-week period. And so with $500 to my name total in company and personal funds and needing to come up with about 40 grand in a couple days to pay payroll,
where are you at? You're 28 at this point?
Yeah, right around
mid-20s,
sure.
whatever.
20,
yeah, okay.
27, 28, yeah.
Yep.
And so I sat my team down. I was in tears. I was I love you guys, but game over. We've built this family that we wanted to build. We did what we came for, but business-wise, it's just nothing. Go home. And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, tell me about that moment. Tell me about what that was like, because you were...
Oh, I still remember it so vividly.
Yeah, you had this sort of typical corporate experience, chewed up, spit out, backstabbing,
Yep.
whatever, profit over everything. You, at a young age, start this company on an idea of we should care about each other. I should like the people I'm working with. I should enjoy the work that I'm doing. You you beat all these odds, right? 99% of businesses fail in the first year. Another 99% of those fail in the second year, right? Like, you overcame a ton of odds at a very young age to build something special on this dream and this idea. I just want to kind of dive deep on what that must have felt like, going to these people that entrusted their lives to you. Dramatic, but at some level, their professional lives to you.
Yeah.
Tell me about that moment and getting ready for that conversation, because that was probably pretty difficult.
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, I remember, I was, not only had we built this thing, but I was, I really felt like I owed these people not just the paycheck for the work that they'd done for the past 2 weeks, but, it was like, they were my boys. A lot of them were older than me, but they felt like my kids. I really felt like, and so, I remember talking to my dad about it and being like, all the money aside, like, I can't let these guys like go onto the street. It felt like they were going to be homeless,
Right.
So, I mean, I was, I remember we had this big conference table that my dad had actually gotten for me, with this big giant whiteboard, and I stood up there, and these were a bunch of 20-something programmer guys. They were not the most vocal of guys. They were just kind of heads down kind of guys.
Mm-hmm.
So I stood up there, told them the situation. I literally was like choking up in tears, and nobody said anything. I was like, come on, somebody just say something,
Mm-hmm.
And so this one kid, he had a real reputation for kind of being a wise ass most of the time, And he says, I'll stay. And I'm like, that's nice, but I don't know if you're being sweet or being a wise ass. So like, I'm going to let it go. And then the next guy says, yeah, me too. I'll stay. And the next guy says, yep. He said, you'll, what did he say? He said, you'll come up with something. You always do. I was like, oh, all right. The next guy, so 10 of them at the time, like, yeah, we're not going anywhere. And I was like, all right, you guys, whatever. I appreciate it. It's so sweet, but I think, you all need a job. You must just be caught up in the adrenaline of the moment. I'll tell you what. I'll leave the door open tomorrow. I was going to lock it, but if you want to show up, show up. If you don't, no hard feelings. I hope we're all still friends. 9:00 the next morning, they all just showed up. And I was like, I don't know. What are we doing? Like, we got nothing to do. And so for 2 months, I literally don't know exactly what we did, but we all worked for 2 months. I hustled my ass off, sent out about 1 billion proposals. They all helped in whatever way they could with those, but there wasn't a lot of help I needed with those. So I don't really know what they did. We had a couple of like $1,000 projects here and there, but it was nothing. So I don't really know, but they, just having them in the room was like such horsepower, And so, long story short, we landed a $250,000 project. This was 20 years ago, and for a little 10 scrappy little guys, that was our biggest contract ever. And then because of that, there had been a company that was eyeing to buy us, but they didn't want to, we couldn't like sell nothing.
Right.
So, with that in hand, I was like, hey, we're a pretty viable business. How about you buy us? And so they did. And in the sale, I just negotiated that everybody had to come along as a group. They wanted to like pick and choose who was going to come along, and that everybody had to get a raise. And, the sale price was, basically just to like, cover some debt and a bunch of other, it was not like a giant deal or anything, but we all got to stay together. And, that company had its own issues and whatever, but we stayed a family, and, still to this day, we've all, not every one of us, but several of us have gone to each other's weddings and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, so it's pretty cool. And, I'm talking an awful lot here, but I'll just say that, well, why don't I leave it there? And I'll
so what did that teach you? I mean, I'm sure, I'm just trying to put myself in your shoes. I'm trying to imagine how I'd be feeling in that kind of a thing. I have this dream. I convince these people to kind of cast their lot with me. I would probably feel like I'm really letting guys down, and, I'd be probably getting choked up in that conversation as well. Walk me through. I'd love to hear a little bit more about like what that taught you and what that showed you and what that path from that pit you were in, giving that presentation to what you saw over the next morning and the ensuing 2 months. Like, what did you learn from that? What did that show you in terms of like your view of the world? Because you had a view that prompted you to even start this company. What did that kind of experience sort of show you and confirm for you or teach you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I remember at the time sort of telling people that I was starting this company and the purpose, and, a lot of people laughing at me and, naive little 23-year-old boy doesn't know how the world works. And, and you're going to get run over like a train. And just bullshit, obviously. But, everybody had their ideas. So what it taught me, though, was like, I don't know if you've been watching Ted Lasso at all, but there's this, great show on Apple TV. And what it kind of taught me was like it actually works. It wasn't just a like Pollyanna kind of idea, like, ooh, let's all be in a hippie commune and rub each other's backs while we work. It was like, no, it actually works. Now, if I had gone into it with the idea like, all right, I'm going to be really kind to people so that when we have, some sort of downfall, they're all going to stay behind me, it never would have worked, right? I mean, I was doing it.
Why do you think that
without trying? Oh, because you can't give expecting to get something back. But when you give openly, you get everything back. Even if they hadn't, stayed on. I mean, I got so much back just from the experience of being in a kind environment, if that makes sense, right? Of sharing, like, it's a cliche to say, it's better to give than to receive or whatever, but it really is. And you're going, and the whole time you're just thinking about how can I make these guys' lives better, Right. And I'll be the first to admit, while we paid really good salaries and all that kind of stuff, there were a couple times where we were like, we don't have much money right now. And, and there was even other times in there where it was like, all right, can everybody take a half salary this pay period or whatever, right? And we tried to pay it back the next one or whatever. And sometimes we did and sometimes we didn't.
Yep.
But when I mean take care of guys, I mean it was like show people what they're really made of and get the most out of them, but not in a extracting the juice kind of way, and like getting them to shine, right? Like getting them to be the best, the most shiny diamond version of themselves that they can be. And so since then, I've just sort of taken those lessons and at first, it looked like I should write a book and start a consulting company, sort of as you do, or as most business books do. Like basically, hey, here, I was successful, do what I did, and you'll be successful too, right? Whatever successful means.
Yep.
And so I wrote, I have, dozens of pages of notes of like all the stuff we did, and we had great benefits and beer on Fridays and a lot of food and camaraderie, and we went to each other's houses, and I bought gifts for the guys when they did something special, like a new stereo or whatever, and all this stuff. Mm-hmm. And then I finally just ripped that book up, and I was like, no, it's not that. It's the inside stuff.
Correct.
It's not the outside stuff.
Yeah, it's not a kombucha bar and free Chipotle every day. It's someone feeling like they're actually a part of something. It's someone feeling like the thing that they're a part of, it resonates with their own mission and their own purpose. And, where you're talking about really building a community. A community is not built around beer on Fridays. A community is built around authentic human-to-human relationships. And you said something that was really interesting a couple minutes ago. And you said, it's better to give than receive. And I think that adage is true. And I think most people would say that, and yet most people don't live that way. Most people seem to give to get. They seem to have an ulterior motive behind the giving, rather than just sort of trusting that if I plant seeds, the harvest will take care of itself. And if I treat people right, those positive externalities that come from a good organization or a good team are just going to naturally happen. You can't over-engineer it. You know what I'm saying? It has to just be authentic. And I think that's where you and I have really resonated with each other. That's what has really resonated deeply with me in terms of how you view the world and, your podcasts and your talks and stuff like that. It's interesting to me that we know that in our personal lives. I know that I can't just be a fake guy to you so that you invite me on your boat or whatever, right? For us to have an actual, We have to have an actual relationship to enjoy spending time together and all that kind of stuff. Why do you think it's so hard for us to bring those natural human like ways that we are wired into this thing that is called business?
Yeah. I mean, this is something I've been pondering a lot recently, right? And I at some point, I probably would have said, that people are greedy, right? And greed is like the root of all evil and all that sort of stuff. And that's what, and everybody's looking to get something instead of just giving.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because they have this sort of like flawed personality in some way, right? But you said something really interesting about like planting the seeds and trusting. Right? So if there's any one problem that I see that people have, it's nothing to blame. There's nothing. If I say you're a greedy person, that sort of is like putting something on you, right? And like change your behavior, right? I think the only problem though is that people don't trust enough. We've not been taught to trust, and there's so much in our environment. Not just the business environment, but the entire sort of milieu that we live in, certainly in the West, but kind of around the world now, that like you're on your own. There's competition, and you gotta like, eat or be eaten, kill or be killed. And with that, if you get that pounded in your head enough, of course you're not going to trust. You're going to think that like you have to go do everything. And I would say that from that understanding or from that misunderstanding, it's very innocent. It's very innocent to try to like be a type A manager and try to squeeze stuff out of people because you are under the very wrong, but innocent misunderstanding that you have to look out for you, that there is not a river, there are a life force, or whatever you want to call it, that is carrying everything along in the way that it's supposed to be. And there's this really great book called The Surrender Experiment. And I love this book because it's written by a yogi, but who, and the whole book is sort of like the gap between these two things that I'm telling you about, basically ended up being the CEO of a $1 billion company with like 2,300 people reporting to him and all this stuff. And the whole book is basically about how one situation just led to another situation. And he just wanted to be, he was getting his PhD in economics, teaching at this like local college. He would literally teach wearing jeans and nothing else. No shirt, no socks, no shoes. And he was like that good, I guess, that like people just left him alone. But then he would, as soon as his class was over, he'd like run back home to go sit in the woods and meditate. And that's all he really wanted. But from here to there, he bought this computer at Radio Shack, in the like 70s or early 80s. And just, somebody said, hey, could you write some like billing software for my medical office? And he's like, I have no idea how to do that, but I can try. And he basically did that. And that grew into this $1 billion company, right? And he was always just taking these turns, these forks in the road or forks in the river, where the river took him. Mm-hmm. He didn't make a 20-year plan. And in that, he led this incredibly rich spiritual life, but also this incredibly rich, sort of earthly life, if you will, of business and all of that stuff. And I just love that book. And, I noticed myself certainly many times getting caught up in like, all right, I need a plan. Where's my next client going to come from? Mm-hmm. Do I have a budget? Do I have this? Of course, a lot of it around money, but also even like with my daughter, like where's she going to go to school? I mean, she's tiny now, she's 5, but as kids get older, we think about, oh, well, you got to have your extracurriculars. Otherwise somebody's going to get your spot. So, there's only so many spots at Harvard. And, if you don't go there, then your whole life is messed up. And like, so from day one, pay attention, folks, because if you don't, life is going to suck for you. And we all go through life, not all of us, but many people go through life like that. And if that's a deep held belief, well, then of course all of your behavior is going to follow.
Yeah. If your motto is life's a bitch, then you die, then life's going to be a bitch, and then you're just going to die. You said something though about, that book sounds super interesting. And as you were thinking about it, I was getting this picture of what I think the most efficient thing in the universe is, and I think it's water. Water wins. Anybody who's in like water restoration business, they're saying is water wins. So if there's a flood, that water's getting through. And, water naturally sort of finds the path of least resistance, right? This is a little bit, this is a little stupid what I'm about to say. But like water is like, it's not fighting against gravity. It's totally surrendered to gravity. And that sort of natural interaction of that system allows for the most efficient path for water to be found. You know what I'm saying? And that surrender, and then something else you said was really kind of interesting, because I've always kind of thought about this. What's the word? The plight of like the average worker, soaking in this sort of toxic, corporate environment, was really rooted down in some of those kind of nefarious things. The greed, the Adamic nature of people, the natural selfishness that we all have. But you kind of reframed that for me, and you said, well, we're kind of brought up in this individualistic society where there's kind of this inherent mentality that this is a zero-sum game, and I can't win if you win, right? Like for me to win, you have to lose. All those things are kind of part and parcel to this kind of mentality, the shape of this thing that we're talking about. And so it's a lot nicer way to look at it, because those are just natural reactions. Like if people are thinking that they're stepping into a fight and they put their dukes up, well, that's not like, they're not a psychopath for putting their dukes up. They think they're in a fight. And so if they're stepping into this corporate realm where they believe that the rules of engagement are zero-sum game or fixed mindset or, the last man standing wins, well then, to your point, those reactions, those behaviors, those ways of being are sort of natural extensions of like how we're wired. You know what I mean? We're in this sort of high anxiety or like high pressure situation. We're going to fall into those backup styles, which are many times, different from that sort of natural, pure version that's inside all of us before we get calloused and jaded,
Right. And it's so obvious that isn't true, that we don't live in this zero-sum game.
Right.
I mean, we have, if you look at over the past, let's just say, pick a number, 150 years, the amount of natural resources on this planet has not grown. We have the same, and yet the economy has grown, I don't even know, but what, 100-fold? I mean, like, massive, massive amounts. We've managed to take, 100 years ago, there was maybe 2 billion, no, in the 50s, there was about 2 billion people on the planet. Now there's 8. We've managed to find jobs for all these people. We've managed to, through human ingenuity, create new stuff, whether that's software or whatever it is, employ everybody, have food for everybody. People are getting, the ratio of people getting, while there's an income disparity, yes, but still the number of people that are becoming millionaires or very successful financially is huge compared to what it used to be. And the internet has a lot to do with that. But of course, the internet was not a thing. Somebody invented it, Al Gore. So it's clear that it's not a zero-sum game, and it's clear. And I'm, my next, I don't want to make too big a deal out of this, but like I'm starting to begin thinking about writing a book on serendipity. So I've started collecting stories of serendipity, and man, they're awesome, right? It's just how you just like, you're in a cafe in Europe and like, minding your own business, and somebody comes and offers you a job. You know what I mean? Like weird stuff like that happens. So it's obvious that if it was all about, you got to try, you go to LinkedIn every day, you got to send out your 20 emails, you got to hustle, if it was that, we'd all be losing, because nobody's good at that. So there's just so much. I hate to call it magic, because it's sort of like, it sort of minimizes it.
Yeah.
But there is a life force, the same life force you say that like digests your food, right, is running everything. And you don't need to worry about it so much. And I have found for myself, and this is kind of the number one, and my teaching, coaching style has shifted over time, but I'd say now the number one thing I help people with is trust. It's helping people to let go of the reins a little bit a little bit, right? Not just showing up at work in your basketball shorts and hoping for the best, right? A little bit, and watching what comes through you instead of from you.
So again, it's just such a reframe, right? It's you're not relying on yourself. There's sort of an inherent trust built into that approach. Yeah, that trust thing is so interesting because my question for you is this: like, do you think that this trust issue, right? We boiled this whole thing. This is just shorthand. This lack of trust thing, which we've kind of attached to this sort of like me against the world, individualistic kind of Western mentality. Do you feel like that trust thing is any different in cultures that are like more communal, that are less individualistic and more about the group? Do you feel like there's a correlation there? And this is, you probably don't have a study on this. I'm just kind of trying to get your sense of it, of like what this like lack of trust in the, as you called the life force, is truly rooted in. Is it the society we're a part of? Is it just the natural sort of state of affairs today? I mean, what is it?
I think in religious communities, for better or worse, they have more of that. There may be a lot of like weird practices or something like that, but they have more of that. They have, and it may be, they may phrase it in weird ways that are sort of like feel prickly to a lot of us, like, oh, that's God's way or whatever. But I think there's a lot more of that. I think, our believing in science as a religion, I'm certainly not saying there's nothing to science, but believing in it as the only answer to everything has really thrown us off course.
Yep.
And again, so obvious that that's not the answer, because things in medicine or whatever that we believed were absolutely true 50 years ago, 10 years ago, we now know are completely false. Super famous astrophysicist.
Stephen Hawking?
No. But anyway, he just said, like, I'm just saying it's not some guy on Twitter that I'm referring to. But he just said, we're probably wrong about the Big Bang. There was stuff that happened before it, right? So these very even fundamental concepts. Now, that's not to say, so therefore we should just throw all science out the window. No, but you don't believe in it like it's a cult. And you realize that there's a whole bunch of forces, material and spiritual, happening all at the same time, most of which is beyond human comprehension. But you're still, I gave you this thing last time, right? How does one fertilized cell, know how to turn into a baby?
It's crazy.
I mean, it's just crazy. It's just crazy. And then that baby has built into it in the same way that cell had built into it, which means it came from that cell originally.
Yep.
That baby knows how to learn how to talk and learn how to walk and learn how to poop and learn how to eat and learn how to make friends and learn how to do a whole bunch of other things nobody's ever taught a kid how to walk.
Right.
Nobody ever said one foot in front of the other.
They just kind of do it.
Coached a kid on like sentence structure, right? Nobody even coached a kid on like making friends. Like they just make friends.
Yeah, right.
And throughout life, then they learn academics, which, we say, all right, well, this is 1 + 1 is 2, with that kind of stuff. But still, the learning all happens within them. Mm-hmm. And then, then they learn about romantic relationships, and then they learn about, finances and whatever. Most of it, I'm not just saying it happens spontaneously, but it really happens without much influence from the outside world. They learn about emotions. They learn, about letdown, and they learn about getting excited about things, and they have their own spiritual experiences, which may or may not be different, similar to ours. They have opinions about politics. They have,
right.
And this is all, I'm just saying, all of that comes from one cell, and we think we got to control everything, and it doesn't work. And even, I'd say, very well-meaning people on either side, let's just say, to make this binary, even though everything I'm saying is that it's not binary, but like you've got, two political parties, you could have, two very well-meaning people, one from each of those political parties, trying to make the world a better place, but they have completely opposing opinions, right? About how to do that.
Right.
And I wanted to get back to this. So to finish that thought, we're never going to get to a better world through our individual ideas of what creates a utopia. Right?
Okay. Yep.
Like one person may say, all right, no guns and open abortions and open borders and whatever, like all these like very liberal ideas. Like that would create this utopian society. Yeah. And then somebody on the other side says like complete opposite.
Everybody needs a gun. We need walls around everything. Yeah.
Right. Right. And no gay marriage and no this and no that. And like that'll make everything perfect. Now, obviously, if you approach it that way, you're only going to get into a fight. And then like the guy with the most guns probably wins. But that was a joke. But what I wanted to say is that like we're not going to get there. And the reason I wanted to bring this up to you is because your company deals with like ethics, and I wonder what does ethics even mean? And if we say it just means sort of like do the right thing, well that's a moving target.
Totally.
What was right 10 minutes ago is different than what it is now.
Well, the word
and what was
morals.
Right. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. The word morals comes from the same root as mores. You know what I'm saying? Social mores change over time. Morals, to your point, are a function of the environment that you're in.
Right. So while everybody now wants to make a manual and rules and zero tolerance rules, which is really a great way to get to more tolerance. What if we said that ethics, and you can teach this. This is not just to throw it up in the air and hope for the best. We really depended on people or trusted people to do the right thing. And I really think that a lot of this lack of trust comes from, a lot of our parental environments where we don't trust kids to do the right thing, right? We feel like we need to tell them to do what's the right thing is. So I'm saying in a corporate environment, instead of saying, all right, you can do this, you can't do this. Here's the line. Oh, wait, the line just moved. The line just moved. The line just moved. Oh, now we've moved it back. Even things like with COVID, right? All right, no masks. Oh, a week later, you got to wear a mask. Right? No masks. It's like this target, right? And then somebody does something, in quotes, wrong. We're like, you didn't know the rule. Out you go.
Right.
Right? So what if there was just more tolerance around everything? And we really taught people, in terms of psychological safety, we use the term psychological safety, like everybody can express their opinion as long as it's within these pretty tight boundaries.
Yeah, as long as it's right in the middle of the fairway, you can say whatever you want.
Right. So I'm just saying, what if ethics was knowing that it is in people inherently, naturally, to do the right thing, and when they don't, it's simply a reflection of some crappy thinking that they have at the time, some perhaps threatened thinking, as we've been referring to, and seeing that nobody is evil. Evil does not exist inherently in people. It's only because they have wacky thoughts. And yes, I mean, even at the extreme ends of the spectrum. And what if we could see that even if somebody made a racial joke or whatever might get you thrown out of a company these days, that doesn't, it's not a reflection of anything. It's just that they had some wacky thinking in the moment. And we all have wacky thinking, which all comes out in different ways. Some of us...
Yeah. I think it takes a certain, just to kind of argue with that point, I think it takes a certain sort of security in self and a confidence in self to say, you know what, I probably got some crazy ideas myself. I don't think the average person is willing to make that statement like with any kind of significant level of intellectual honesty. And I think because of that, the only other position you can be in is that, well, then they have the bad ideas. And then that otherism creeps in. I think to achieve what you're talking about, the path to it is perhaps getting people comfortable with the fact that I probably have some crazy ideas, whatever, which will inherently inject a lot more sort of grace and margin or I don't know,
Well, they're not
flexibility.
necessarily like formed ideas, like, that I think this group of people should be moved to a farm somewhere or something. It's not like that sort of thing, but like many people have weird thoughts and that just makes them drink all the time. Or many people have weird thoughts that makes them, have other addictions of,
I see what you're saying.
shopping
Okay.
or whatever. Many people, it makes them just angry and they yell a lot. Maybe people, it makes them feel like they have to lie or whatever it is. So it's not that I have this weird thought and you have that weird thought. We're all just coming up and we're not doing it. It's like, it's part of this life force that, you don't know what you're going to be thinking a minute from now. You just don't.
Yep.
It's going to come to you. And so as that comes to you, you're going to act based on what seems real in that moment. Now, some of us have more self-control than others, but that can be very repressive as well, right? And I think I'm just saying, and I would never want somebody to institute my policy. I would just hope that this would get people to think a little bit more on like, what does it mean to see that there is no separation, that there really, people say like, oh, black and white people are the same. It's just a skin color, right? I mean, people have been saying that since forever. And yeah, while that's obviously true, why can't we go a whole lot deeper than that and say, the guy who likes to, slash people's tires is the same as the guy who likes to put flowers on people's windshields, right? There's no separation there either. But we have a very behavior-driven culture where you get judged on your behavior again.
Yeah.
And, your performance at work and everything. And you do something bad, off with your head. And I'm just saying, what if we were able to zoom out a little bit, not be so trigger happy, all of us, and say, you know what? There actually isn't separation. There can't be. We're all just like drops of water in the ocean. And you take a glass of water out of the ocean, you don't know who's who. You just all, that's it. These are all just appearances. And I think that if we could do, it would improve companies instantly, and it would improve this so-called world very quickly as well.
So then what argument would you make? Let's say thought experiment, we're trying to convince somebody who has, magic power to wave a wand and institute this type of thinking across their organization, but their reticence is the fear of the potential ensuing chaos that this type of a mentality in a corporate environment would generate. What would you sort of say to that person to get them to feel a little bit more comfortable, maybe waving that wand a little bit?
Yeah, well, like most things, you kind of gotta see it yourself, and then you teach it.
Yeah.
So if you, if somebody was scared of the ocean, let's say, right, you wouldn't say, "Trust me, just go swim in the ocean," and expect that they would.
Yeah.
They would see the same ensuing chaos you're talking about. But if I said no, and if I've learned to sort of overcome my fear of swimming, let's just say. Mm-hmm. And I say, no, come with me. I'll show you. Trust me. I'll show you. And through, a very gentle process, you really get them to trust in you and to trust in themselves, most importantly, to see their own purity, their own whatever. And they're like, oh, yeah, it's not that scary. Well, then it's really not that hard to bring it to other people, right? So I'm saying right. I can't convince people, do it and this is why, back to what I said, I didn't write a book that was like 10 steps to a cool company, because it doesn't work. It just would never, there's a million of those books and they don't work.
Yeah, they don't work because it doesn't get down to it, because it's so sort of surface level, right? Like those 10 steps are just the activities that in some certain sort of like combination of people, circumstances, industry, whatever, really worked. Where I think the real answer is whatever those sort of like whatever the things that are in the equation that draw or that kind of push a company toward being a great company are very idiosyncratic for that particular situation. But for it ever to like move, it has to come from like a place of purity. And if that place of purity is like, if that well of purity, of purpose, whatever, for lack of a better term, if that well of purity is properly tapped, then those manifestations are naturally going to occur. They're going to be appropriate for the company you're in or the workforce you have or the industry you're in. But to your point, you can't just you can't just automatically say, cool, here are these 10 steps that are universal, these are silver bullet, universally applicable recipe to build a great company. To your point, it's too complex to just apply, one hammer to the, plethora of nails that each company is, out there.
You're right. And what I'm trying to do now is say there is a something that applies to all companies, but what that is having everybody understand like how this human operating system
100%. Exactly.
But if that, and in the organizations that I've seen that are most successful, and this is before I have interacted with them, it's obvious there's a direct correlation between how much sort of inner peace / this understanding people have and how good the culture is, and consequently how much work they get done and good product and good sales and all that stuff.
Agree.
It's so obvious.
Agree.
Yeah.
So there is a common element, and it's a foundational element. And so I was my son just his last day of fourth grade was yesterday, and he came to work with me today, and he wants to be a CEO when he grows up. So it's very cute. He's 10. And we're driving into work today, and he asks me, Dad, do you think I'm going to be a good CEO when I grow up? And I thought about it. He wants to be a CEO. So I thought about it, and I told him, if you work really hard and you care about other people more than yourself, you'll be a great business person. But if you only care about money, you're going to be a terrible business person. And we talked through that a little bit. And like, obviously you have to learn finance or business or management or leadership or whatever these other persuasion, sales. You have to learn those things. But those are sort of like second order applications. They're the way that our hands interact with our world. That's external. If we aren't starting with that proper, heart posture, which I would say is, work hard, bust ass, like put your gifts to work and focus on other people, trust this human thing that you're talking about, then you're naturally going to manifest the things in your particular business or in this particular circumstance or for this particular team that are appropriate manifestations of that like heart. But I'm saying without that heart, without that commonality, which I think I've seen as I've studied cultures, over time, you see WD-40, which is a phenomenal culture. You see Bob Chapman's company, phenomenal culture, right? Like you see these consistent things in cultures that are in different industries, and the manifestation of that strong culture comes in different flavors, right? Like there's different sort of symptomatic manifestations of this thing, but like that common thing is there. It's a trust in the system. It's a trust in the human thing. It's the trust in putting people over profits will actually generate more profits. It's a comfortability with the paradoxical nature of the reality that we live in, where if you can just let go a little bit, if you can just surrender, the surrender project, if you can just surrender a little bit, the path to your, proper destination is much more efficient.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, I have no argument with that. I think a related thing is that a lot of people have been saying to me recently, and I don't know why, like these things seem to come in cycles.
Serendipity.
Well, a lot of people are saying they're stuck now. It's like not something I heard a year ago.
Yeah, it's like a new term for this thing people are feeling. Yeah.
Stuck. What do I do? How do I get unstuck? So back to the water analogy, right? You like the water. If we have a river and there's a stick flowing down the river and it gets stuck on a rock, right? And then it stays there for a few days, and then the rains come and the water level in the river goes up, and then the stick continues down on the river. Now, while that stick was stuck on the rock, starting to sound like a poem, it would have been ludicrous for that stick to think that it was stuck somehow and not think that it was in flow. So we have these really weird ideas of what it means to be in flow or stuck. And of course, they're very binary because we love binary.
Yeah, we love black and white. Yeah.
And we're not seeing that when we're stuck or when we get fired or when we get divorced or when we have no ideas or when we get yelled at, that we're somehow down. And then these other times we're up. And I'd like to be more up than I am down. Not seeing that like it's a freaking sine wave. Not a perfect one, obviously. But the sine wave or the tides of the ocean, right? Low tide does not wish it was high tide and vice versa. It's just part of a cycle. And I don't want to say it's like a, it's like a tide to the moon or anything like that. I'm just saying like the stick is not concerned about, it's like, I'm going to hang out here. And when it is time for me to go, I will go. And you hear like about, some like gurus and enlightened people, that's kind of how they talk, right? Like, yeah, I will go where I am called and I will know why I'm called. How will you know? I'll know when I know.
Yeah, it's about being able to reframe every circumstance as something that you will be able to build from, you will be able to learn from, and that allows you to sort of like, I mean, it sounds kind of crazy, but like rejoice in your infirmities or recognize that, hey, this part of this cycle is going to keep moving and these waters are going to come. And while I might feel stuck right now, that's really kind of a human feeling that's not necessarily sort of true from like a full system perspective, you know what I'm saying? And that in itself can be freeing if you can really, actualize that way of thinking.
Yeah. And you don't even need to reframe it. You see, once you really get into that trust mode,
yeah,
you'll just see that like,
totally.
I am where I am. And the next step, not better or worse, is coming. The next thing is coming. It's on its way already, and that one might be even harder than this one, more stucked, if you will.
Right.
But I'm on the path. I have to be. There's no.
Where else would I be?
No way.
Right.
Where else would I be? So, I mean, I don't know how we are in time here, but there's a lot here, right? And I know that sometimes when I talk to people about this stuff, they're like, "So what do I do?"
Yeah. Right.
Right. So what do I do? So can I just go there for a minute?
Yeah, please.
To say that there's nothing to do is probably not very helpful to most people. So, two things. One, one is to practice, like, not letting anything bother you. Right? And people say, well, what if somebody hits me over the head with a baseball bat? Then what am I supposed to do? Well, let's start smaller. How about when somebody cuts you off in traffic? How about if you start to realize that there's nothing out there that can harm you? There's nothing out there that can bother you. And start with something small. Start with a paper cut. Start with somebody cutting you off in traffic. Then get bigger. Maybe your kids yell at you or something. And you see that nothing has the power to affect your inner peace. Nothing has the power to do that. And I know that it sounds a little bit different than what we're talking about, but I swear this is the path to get there. As people start feeling less threatened, which they will by calming themselves down, they will not see, like in the Matrix, like the Matrix movie, right? He's able to dodge bullets. Why? This is not a body thing. It's because he's able to slow everything down. Slow it all down. And you start to see that you don't need more bulletproof vests when you see that there are no bullets.
Right.
So you slow it down. Your boss yells at you. Okay, great. And of course, you're not going to get this 100%. You're not probably going to get 20%. But just try starting to see it a little bit. And then start seeing how when your boss yells at you and says, we need this faster, and you go, panic, and you start to see that, like, no, when he says that, I just see that he's in a bad mood. And so I'm just going to keep doing my thing, and you keep doing your thing, and you see that, like, oh, nothing bad happened. So, like, you learn. Next time he yells at me, guess what? All I got to do is grin and nod and keep working, and everything's going to be just fine. Again, I can't convince you of this, but you're going to see it yourself.
Yeah, what's interesting is we have this trust equation that we've learned about, and we use it all the time. And we're many times trying to build trust. Ethics and compliance folks are trying to build trust in their organization. We as a potential vendor, we're trying to build trust with decision makers. Trust is a massive concept. You know, so the trust equation is in the numerator, there are a bunch of things that we want to get higher. And then in the denominator are a bunch of things we want to get lower. Okay. And so if we can get the numerator higher and get the denominator lower, trust is going to go up. So the numerator is, you know, this is kind of high level, but it's credibility plus reliability plus intimacy. Intimacy is authenticity. So if I can get all those things going up, that's going to make my trust level go up. And in the denominator, the real killer is what's called self-focus. So the more self-absorbed I am, the more focused I am on myself, the less sort of mental room I have to focus on you, the less empathy I have available to engage in understanding how you view the world. And you can feel that. You know, we've all met people that have been, you know, so, you know, they're trying to get us something. You know, the classic example is like a salesperson who has like massive commission breath, where they clearly just want the sale. They don't really care about, you know, what your life is going to be like afterwards. We don't trust those people naturally, right? And that's because their self-focus is so high. You know, that denominator is so big in this model that the trust is going to fall. What we've been talking about is how trust, excuse me, how the key to this whole thing is trust. And you can't surrender unless you trust, right? Like, my daughter's not going to jump to me in the pool if she doesn't trust, you know, she's not going to surrender to that jump if she thinks I'm going to drop her, right? So like, if the most effective way for us to engage in our reality is a high level of trust, how interesting is it that we can achieve that by, as you're saying, reducing our self-focus? Not everything is about me. Not every bump in the road means that God's against me, right? Like, it's as if I can reduce my natural level of self-absorption, then I can really view things that are happening a lot less like these are like slights against me, and a lot more like, well, this is just data. You know, so if the boss is pissed off, I don't have to take all that stuff personally. If I lose my job, I don't have to take all that personally. If my project doesn't work, I don't have to take all that personally, because I'm not so self-absorbed where I think everything is about me. The more we can let go of those things, the easier it is for us to engage with this reality that we're in, and the easier it is for us to get the benefits that water gets, which is fully surrendered to gravity, and it can just find that path of least resistance. But I just found that to be kind of like an interesting correlation, that like, in order for us to get more trust, we have to like lighten up a little bit and stop being so self-focused, which is what we're naturally going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I love that. And I'd say in addition to being self-focused, being focused on outcomes.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay. That's a whole thing right there, right? Because
the whole thing
how
right
much
there.
of those outcomes are truly rooted in our belief that those outcomes are a representation of our ego or ourselves. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah, that's level 2.
Yeah.
That's level 8. But level 1, even just being unattached to outcomes, because you don't really know what's best for you or what's best for the company or whatever.
How could you?
And how could you? You have no idea what's around the corner, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we lost this project. You know, it's one of the best things. My dad is gone now, but like the best thing he ever taught me was like, he was not a philosopher or whatever, but he was just like, he's always like, yeah, there's a better one around the corner. Whenever I'd lose something, a job, girlfriend, whatever. It wasn't in a like, don't worry about it kind of way. He was just like, just trust me, it's the right thing. There's a better one right around the corner. And of course, in your grief of losing a girlfriend or whatever, you don't see it. You think it's impossible. You think you'll never love again. And then, you know, literally, you know, right around the corner is 10 times better. Or a job or whatever. And it just happens over and over and over again if you're willing to see it. As you said, if you think life sucks and then you die, you're always going to see Murphy's Law, you know.
Right. Oh, this always happens to me. Of course, the worst thing in the world happens to me, because that always happens to me. I mean, it's crazy.
Yep. Yeah.
My gosh, dude, I feel like I could talk to you all day, man.
Oh, thanks.
So let's you know, we have a couple of minutes left. I'd love to talk a little bit about like, what advice would you give to somebody who is in a role that is at least closer to like touching, controlling, influencing the culture, who feels stuck. Like, they feel stuck, they can't affect it. They, you know, a lot of the things that I hear about are like, well, it takes forever to change a battleship, you know, to turn a battleship, that takes so long, which is a really, you know, that's a really kind of, it's almost like a defeatist mentality. Yeah, exactly. Great point. Right. But it's almost this defeatist sort of like low agency mentality where it's like, well, I can't affect this thing, it's too big. I don't think that that's true. I don't think you think that that's true. So what advice would you give somebody who, let's give a couple, 2-3 minute coaching session to somebody who's in that spot, who's feeling stuck with respect to like affecting the culture?
Yeah. Well, all I can talk about is, the sort of effect that I feel like I've had with folks. And that is that in short order, you see, most of the people that I work with think that they need to control it. They need to turn around the battleship, whatever the heck that means. They need to do it. And as we work together, we'll talk about anything. We'll talk about relationships. We'll talk about substance abuse. We'll talk about their sailing, whatever. We'll talk about anything, but all looking in the same direction of thought, of trust, of inner peace, all these sorts of things. And and of course they're all like, this is really wonderful, but how the hell does this help me turn around the ship? God damn it. And I said, just trust. And they're like, all right, this was nice, I guess. And then they go back to work. And 2 weeks later, they call me and they say, everyone is kind of turning around the ship. And I'm not doing it. There's a slight amount of hyperbole in there, but not much.
Yeah.
That's what happens. People get more calm, inner peace, quiet, listening, all of those things in themselves. All of a sudden, people want to be around them more. People want to serve them more. Everybody wants inner peace. They see that you have it, they can start sharing with it, right? They see that you're not putting up your fist to fight. All of a sudden, they're not putting your fist up to fight. Guess what happens?
Yep.
The boat starts going the other way. Also, people tell me, my relationships got better. I quit drinking, whatever. And these are things that we may have never talked about.
Right. They're the natural
right?
extensions of this change of heart,
Exactly. They're natural extensions. So that's what I would say. I'd say the key is getting some level of inner peace. And there's I love to help business people with that because I really get business and I get business people in type A, and I've been there myself. There's a billion books on this. Pick anyone.
Grab one.
Anyone.
Open it up to the middle. Read the page. It's
Open up
be the
to the
same.
middle. But that's the key. It's not how do I do more stuff to get more stuff. Even if you're not talking about getting. It's like, what do I have to do to get results? Right? How do I improve my golf game? Well, even that. You get a little calmer and less wound up about how horrible you are. Your golf game's going to improve too. But this is a slowing down. This is a trusting in yourself, in the universe, in other people, in assuming people are kind, not looking to screw you.
Yep.
That alone would change everything.
Well, yeah, because then you're not wasting all these sort of mental calories keeping balance sheets of all these, slights that you perceive to be happening around you. What a way to live. I think so much of the stuckedness or so much of the anxiety that we get in our lives, not just in work, is due to this distance or due to the gap between what we can control and what we think we can control, what we can influence and what we think we can influence. And so I've always pictured this sort of sphere around myself. Maybe it's just directly on my skin. And then there's another sphere kind of outside of that of what I think I can control. And that fluctuates from time to time because I think, boy, if I work really hard, then I'll be able to control all these things. And you see people do this all the time where they're wringing their hands, nervous about something that are so clearly outside of their control. It seems insane. But actually anything outside of that initial sphere is going to generate that kind of an outcome because you can't control anything outside of yourself. You can't control anything outside of your attitude and your response to things, I think. So to the extent that you think you can control something beyond those things, odds are you're going to wind up in a place of sort of stuckedness or a place of anxiety, a place of, living in regrets or, in anxiety about the future of what's going to happen. If you can really collapse down the gap to, zero gap, it allows you to engage in this thing that you're talking about because you're naturally going to let go a lot more. There's a lot of other things that were on your radar screen that you were wasting sort of mental calories on that now are not on there because you know that those categorically are outside of your control. It just allows you to let go a little bit more, go with the flow a little bit more, and really start exhibiting those characteristics that end up leading to the change that we're talking about. So as trite as this whole all sounds. Like if you want to change the world, you just have to change yourself. You can, you want to be the change in the world, be the change in the world. Maybe that's, someone should coin that. That could be a good quote. Be the change you want to see in the world. Yeah, that's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Yeah. But what does that mean, right? It doesn't mean like if you want people to be less racist, then you should be less racist. It doesn't mean that. It means if you want a peaceful world, be peaceful.
Be peaceful. That's right.
Be peaceful. Be at, people, my grandmother used to say, like, I'm going to give them a piece of my mind, But and just, what I just thought of recently, which I thought was clever, if I may say so, is like, when you're saying that I'm going to give somebody a piece of my mind, what you're really saying is I'm giving away my peace of mind.
Right.
Right? We all, right? Why would you ever want to attack somebody in any way? Right? I'm going to tell them how it is. Like, why would you? Because what happens? You probably make them upset too, but you've attacked your own peace of mind.
Yeah, right.
But what's the trick? We think if I'm going to tell them, I'm going to make this right. I'm going to zing them, and then I'm going to feel better. It's literally an impossibility. You cannot be at peace when you are attacking.
Right.
You cannot be. And we think I'm going to, that employee, bothered me somehow or lost us money or whatever. No, fire. I'm going to show him. Watch. I'm going to make an example of him. Mm-hmm. And you just live in misery for doing that.
Yeah, because you're in kind of always in a fight mode, always in this sort of like heightened state with cortisol as your fuel or something,
Yeah, these are byproducts, but it's just these are more spiritual things that beyond the body that you cannot have the peace of God or whatever you want to call it in you when you are attacking. It's not, and an attack can be a physical attack, firing somebody, yelling at somebody, whatever. But just as well, why that guy's right? That guy shouldn't have. That's a great one, right? Whenever you notice yourself
shouldn't,
saying,
yeah, speaking in the conditional, happened, yeah, exactly.
That's also an attack on what is.
Yep.
Right, just what is, not nobody to blame even, right? Oh, it shouldn't be raining. Great, that'll make you feel better.
Yeah, that should fix it. Yep.
Yeah, great.
Well, this was awesome, dude. This awesome, is very, very, very fun. Where can people get in touch with you? Because you have such a great. Your book is great, by the way. Let's give a plug for that, where people can find that, and where can people get in touch with you to maybe get some help or to get some coaching or maybe do an engagement or something with you.
Yeah, sure. The website is humansworking.co. I am Naf, N-A-F, at humansworking.co. On the website, there is a link to the book, of course. And what I would really love is anybody listening to this to send me a message and tell me like what you got out of this, right? So I would, if you just say like, oh, that's great stuff, everybody should do that or something. I mean, that's nice and all, but what I would really love to hear is something that you heard that shifted something in you. And if you do, I promise to reply with more than a sentence, and I'll even send you a book. So that's my deal.
Okay, very good.
But I would really love to hear what people are seeing for themselves.
It's so cool because we're really on this sort of frontier, this cutting edge of this new way of thinking, I think. And a lot of these old vestigial views on how business works and how people work and how work works, I think are starting to fall away. And we're moving toward this new kind of chapter, where a lot of the groundwork that has been laid over the last 30 years or a lot of the seeds that have been planted for the last 30 years are going to start blossoming. And there's an interesting story about how bamboo grows. So if you plant a bamboo seed, first year, nothing happens. Second year, nothing happens. Third, fourth year, nothing happens. Fifth year, it grows 9 feet in a year or something like that. So that same analogy can be applied to this industry that we're in because we're moving into this generation. This generational shift is causing a different prioritization on average to exist within our workplace. And I think a lot of the things that our grandfathers cared about in work are deprioritized relative to the current workforce. So the seeds are planted, the circumstances for growth are here, and I just think over the next 5 years, we're going to get that 9-foot expansion in that bamboo plant. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yep.
Awesome. All right, man. Yep. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the Ethics Experts. Until next time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
That was great. That was fun.
Cool. I felt like we got lost. All because of me, but